All right, OTB Sports is back with another series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in Premier League and Irish football history. With behind-the-scenes access, we'll be chatting to some of the legendary names from the biggest clubs and meet the crucial people behind the scenes who make a Premier League club just what it is. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. I'm delighted to be joined by someone who is quite literally an English Football Hall of Famer. Karen Carney is with us. How are you keeping, Karen?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. It should have been so different, though. You shouldn't have been in the English Football Hall of Fame. You should have been in the Irish Football Hall of Fame. You are, at heart, a Mayo girl.
I am a Mayo girl, yeah. My grandparents are from Mayo and we're from Castlebar, and we have a home there still. So could have potentially been playing for Ireland, but yeah, it turned out to be England in the end.
We've obviously benefited greatly in this country from the grandparents' rule on the men's side of things. Was it ever an option? Was it ever something that was discussed?
They approached me to play for Ireland for sure. I think my dad was keen for me too, but I think since I was a little girl, I'd always had my heart set on playing for England and understood where I came from. But you know, I went down the England route, and the rest is history. But I'm still very proud of my Irish roots, and obviously love my grandparents dearly.
That path from going from being a little girl wanting to play for England to going on and becoming the woman who plays 144 times for England is one that's probably going to be easier for this current generation. For your generation, when did you start thinking that that was a realistic prospect, to go and play and have football and be able to make a living from it and represent your country? Was the path in England relatively straightforward?
No, not at all. From the age of 11, I said to my mum and dad, I want to play for England. I didn't know how that was going to happen. I didn't know whether there was an England team. And certainly there was no thought in my mindset that I was ever going to make an income from it. And I researched it as a little girl, and turned out there was, you know, a senior team and I think an under-21 team at the time. And, you know, I was 14 and trialled, and, you know, they kept me on their books until there was an age group that came available when they made it happen. But the path was completely different to what it is now. And you mentioned making a living. Honestly, I never thought to this day I would make a living out of football. And, you know, it's probably only been the last 2 or 3 years of my playing career where I thought, yeah, I can make a living from it. But the rest of it was just about passion, enjoying what I do. And I just wanted to play football since I was a little girl. And I think I fell in love with football. And I think my parents are great that they always encourage you to follow your passions and your dream. And I guess it was a little bit weird for them to see their little girl go, oh, I want to play football instead of go down a dancing route, which I originally went down. So, but they were super supportive.
So when you go back and you think back to, say, that quite groundbreaking Arsenal team you were a part of, who went on and won a Champions League, and there was a big Irish representation on that side as well, I remember. Yeah. Was that completely part-time back then?
Yeah, we trained twice a week at most, and then played on the weekend. And yeah, it was completely part-time. I actually was at university at the time, so I only really turned up on a Sunday for games and trained at university because I was on a scholarship there. So that was kind of my route, was to get free education through football. I didn't think I would get paid from it. And yeah, the Arsenal team was unbelievable because like I said, we hardly trained together. It was just a group of people that were really passionate to represent Arsenal and try and win as many trophies as possible. In the first year that I joined, we won the quadruple, and, you know, it's never been done since. No other English team has won the Champions League, so it's something that we're really proud of. And you mentioned the Irish girls, and, you know, they were immense. Emma Byrne was in goal, Kira Grant was there. You know, it was just a ridiculous side that we had. It was kind of like the Great Britain side. So, yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
This has been a pretty groundbreaking time for women's football in Ireland. We just had the news that there's going to be equal pay for the men's team and the women's team for the first time. It's been something that's been a long time coming, and Emma Byrne was right behind that when I think she really brought to the fore the conditions that the women's team were going through, of having to get changed at airports and give back their tracksuits when they were on international trips. When you were in that Arsenal squad and you know, I think it was the time Alex Scott was there. You talk about Emma Byrne. There was a lot of very influential figures in the game. I know you're a lot younger, but at that stage, are you looking at what's going on at, say, at Arsenal and the men's team and the resources that are a big club like that and thinking, actually, you know, we're winning Champions Leagues here. We deserve more and we need to go and chase that? Or are you at a stage where you're just thinking, we just go and play our games?
I think the only success comes when you win and you can speak up. So the only thing we can control is how much we won. And I think then you can ask for stuff, but then on a negative, that is like, why would you need more when you're winning everything? So it's like a real conundrum at the time. But, you know, it wasn't the right thing for the women's game, really. You can't be changing, you know, in airports. You can't be giving your tracksuits back. You're representing your country. You know, you're representing your football clubs you should be a part of, not apart from. So, you know, people like Emma Byrne, who I think has got the most Champions League appearances, you know, known, and how many caps she's accumulated for her country. You know, she is a pioneer for Irish football, and it's fantastic to see her speaking out and demanding more, and rightly so, because that's the only way progression happens. And I think going back to Arsenal, when we won the quadruple, like I said, we just controlled what we could. We can't control how many people invest or do what they do. We can only go and represent the badge to our best of our ability. And, you know, I was really proud of that. And I know the rest of the team was, and I think the club was as well at this. So we made history, and like I said, no one's done that since.
It's a good time to talk to you as well, because we're on the eve of the new WSL season and there's a big television deal involved with it, and I think everybody's going to see a lot more. And the more people see, the more they understand, they can analyse, they can get to know the players, they can be critiquing in a far more informed way, which is exactly what football should be at every level. When we're watching over the next couple of weeks the standard at the very top of English football, and you think back to when you started at Birmingham and you were probably, 14, 15 at that stage, how dramatic a change has there been over the last 20 years in terms of quality?
Well, I kind of liken it to a vicious cycle, really. You know, without funding, no one's professional. So going back to how we spoke about at Birmingham or Arsenal, you're training once a week, you're not going to be good. So then the product doesn't look as good, then no one really wants to watch it. And then no one watches it, there's no sponsorship. So how do you break that cycle? And along the way, there's been people that have gone, no, we're going to break that cycle. And there's been greater investment, then there's more training time. So teams are more go semi-pro, then they go professional, the product's better, people want to watch it, sponsors get involved, more money comes in, and TV deals. So you turn a vicious cycle that was what women's football was into more of a virtuous cycle. And, you know, that's what's happened now. And these TV deals are amazing. Like you said, greater exposure, more professionalism, the product will get better and better and better. And I was speaking to a player the other day who I played with quite a while ago, and she was like, look, as the level has gone through the roof, it's getting better and better every year. And that's because of investment. You know, if you invest, you're going to get a better return for it. And it's taken a long time to get to this point, but one we should be super excited about, and one that we should be really proud of that's happened. And so many people want to push the game forward and will continue to do so.
Do you look at the matches now and think, if I was 22, what I could have done if I was a full-time professional athlete? Or are you happy to say, you know, I had my time, it wasn't what these girls are going to experience, but it was still something very special?
I've had a really great career. I don't have any regrets about that. Sometimes you have a moment where you're like, wow, I wish I was back playing. But I think every player, male and female, would say that. So I don't look back and have any regrets. I'm more of a positive, forward-thinking person. So, like I said, I've had a great career. I'm humbled by it and wouldn't change it for the world. And now I'm in an exciting part of my career where I get to go to games, watch games, analyse it, and come away from it not with a broken body at times. So that's a benefit for me. But yeah, what I'm more pleased about is I'm still involved in the game in some capacity, because you see a lot of players that are lost, put a lot of time and effort into the women's game, and kind of then don't have the opportunity to stay in it through media, coaching, or various other roles that are now happening because of the growth of the game. So I'm just really humbled that I'm still a part of it.
After Arsenal, you spent some time back at Birmingham, you were in Chicago, and then you arrive at Chelsea and you're working under Emma Hayes. You win an FA Cup. Like, that's very recent. as well. That time at Chelsea, how enjoyable was it to have that later in your career where you're still competing at the very highest level? It seems under a really progressive coach as well, in Emma Hayes.
Well, I'd worked with Emma at Arsenal. Emma was the assistant manager when we won the quadruple and those trophies. And then Emma Hayes took me to Chicago. And then when I went back to Birmingham, we just stayed in contact. And then she kept asking me year and year. And I thought, you know what, I want to go and probably come into the latter part of my career. I want to play Champions League football and I want to win trophies. And Chelsea was the right fit. And, you know, she's a pioneer in herself. So, you know, she's progressive. She's innovative. She's an absolute thought provoker. She's brutal at times. She's very, very honest. So that's challenging. And sometimes the truth hurts, but unfortunately...
Go on, tell us more about how brutal she can be then.
She's just brutal. She just is. She'll just call you out. Or then with me, it was more, she didn't call me out. It was more like, oh, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed comments. You know, when you play games and you're like, oh, no. And especially for me, who I'd worked with her so many times, I don't want to let her down. So, but then when I was injured, I was doing scouting reports for her and she was always pushing me and making me present in front of the group or in front of staff or people and always challenging me in that aspect. And now it's no coincidence I do what I do since I finished football. So she's very brutal, but also she's, you know, I think since she's had a little boy as well, she sees it from a motherly point of view. So she's got that capacity as well. And I think she's the best manager that I've ever worked under, worked for. And she's also the most draining coach I've ever worked for because her standards, her drive does not stop. And I'll probably jokingly say she forced me into retirement because I wanted a break. So, but yeah, she's relentless for sure.
How are you with taking criticism?
I'd like to think I was all right. Yeah, I think, you know what, like, if it's the right thing, like, especially towards the latter end of my career, when she would criticise me, you know if they're right or wrong. Don't get me wrong, I'd have an argument with her if I felt it was wrong behind closed doors. But I think, you know, 9 times out of 10, she was 100% right. And when she's right and she says it with good intent, and you can't argue with that. So I always had to take it on the chin.
The sort of sessions you were doing at Chelsea in those last couple of years then, where it was becoming far more professional and you had players coming in from all parts of the world and lots of different influences, how different was that from, say, even when Emma was assistant coach at Arsenal?
Like I said, at Arsenal, we had every player possible that was the best in Great Britain. We spoke about the Irish players, the Scottish players. We had Julie Fleeting, we had Kim Little. Trying to think off the top of my head now, but we had Jane Ludlow from Wales. We just had a formidable Great Britain team. And then I think now with the growth of the game in the WSL, I read a stat the other day that 44 players represented from the WSL played in the Olympic Games, and only 33 from the American League. So we're getting a lot of, you know, foreign players wanting to come and play in our league because it's the best league in the world. And I think at the latter part of my career when I was at Chelsea, you know, we had every international probably from around the world, from, you know, Swedish players to Ji So-young, who, you know, Korean player who was outstanding, technically gifted. We obviously had our English players, Scottish players. You know, now there's Sam Kerr, and there's just a wealth of, it was such a multicultural dressing room. And sometimes we had issues at lunch because everyone was talking a different language. But the only language that mattered was the football one when we went onto the pitch. And I think somehow we found a way. And so, yeah, it was very different to kind of having an all Great Britain team effectively at Arsenal to then being completely multicultural and, you know, having to bring that all together as well.
It's interesting how you say that the work that Emma was asking you to do off the pitch has helped you now in your role as a pundit. It sounds more, though, maybe she was mentoring you for a coaching role. Was that something that you gave a lot of consideration to, or did you think actually I can have maybe more influence on football as a pundit?
She actually offered me a job when I said I wanted to retire. First of all, she said, "Are you sure?" and tried to talk me out of it, and I was like, absolutely not. And then she said, "Come work for me," and it just wasn't the right fit, the right time. I wanted a real break from kind of club football. And that's why I love the media. I'd been doing it before I retired and jumped into that. But I think to be a coach, you have to have a certain, skill set. And I don't believe I have that skill set. I think a lot of people say it's because you haven't tried and they think I would be good at it. But
what do you think you're missing?
I'm not going to lie, I'm dyslexic, so I really struggle with writing out the session. So that really causes me anxiety. But then people will be like, well, you get coaching for that and you just manage. And I have a psychology master's as well. So they're like, you're like the perfect fit. But I think you've got to be passionate about it. And I was super passionate about playing. I am super passionate about tactics now that I've retired. I just put that tactical knowledge in how I do punditry, and I hope that's how it comes across. Maybe in time I'll go into coaching, but I think I think what I've noticed with Emma is that, she's been doing coaching for 20 odd years plus, and her experience of life actually enables her to be the best manager. And I think I'm still relatively young and still want to learn, but also I want to enjoy my retirement. So I couldn't barely look after myself when I played, let alone managing 20 staff members and 30 odd players. So I'm quite enjoying my time at the moment.
You're obviously doing punditry across the men's game and the women's game. I'm interested in your thoughts on the place of the men's game around the women's game and how much of an assistance it should be, how reliant the women's teams should be on the clubs and the opportunities and the investment that is made on the men's side, and that balance of where Chelsea and Manchester City, who seem to be so progressive, and Arsenal, where there's other clubs maybe who aren't quite at the same level in the way they're treating the teams. So what do you want to see the women's teams playing at Stamford Bridge and the Etihad, or actually do you think, no, they need to find their feet bit by bit and gradually move up, like they do, I think, so brilliantly at Manchester City, where they have the Academy Stadium, which is 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. You get a packed house, you get a great atmosphere. As to how that might develop over the next few years.
What I would say is I'll probably speak a little bit more from my Chelsea experience, because that was where I was before I retired. So I think what football clubs have got to do is make the women's team be a part of, not apart from. I think that's really key. And I felt when I was at Chelsea, they very much made us a part of. And where I would like to see the game develop is that, it's not, men's football, women's football. It's not, I'm a Birmingham fan. I want to believe that it's not Birmingham men, Birmingham women. It's Birmingham. And it's the same at Chelsea. Part of, not apart from. It's Chelsea. Yes, they're called men and the women's teams, but it's Chelsea Football Club. You have the same badge, you have the same pride, you have the same passion, same fan base. Your fans want to do well. And go back to me being a Birmingham fan. I want Birmingham City to do well. That includes men's, women's, academy. It's a football club, and that's what I want to see. Of course, there's progression in that, and I liken Birmingham men to Birmingham women. The men are probably 100 years in advance, because that's when they were formed. So, and the game has got to try and catch up. Will it catch up in the speed? It doesn't need to. It just needs to keep progressing in the manner that it's doing. And I think men's football clubs are doing fantastic things by, again, including them in it. Can they be on all the marketing campaigns? I went to St Andrews recently, and outside the stadium, it was a male player and a female player. Perfect. Again, that's a part of, not apart from, and that's exactly how it should be. Incorporate, both sets of players, because at the end of the day, when I was a little girl and when I watched Birmingham City, the men's team, I was a little girl, so I was a fan. So you can't, ignore the female fans as well. So that's why it's important. And I think football clubs have got to make everyone be a part of it, and they seem to be doing so. And in regards to stadiums, I think like Leicester women are playing, 70% at the King Power. The game on Sundays, Arsenal versus Chelsea, is at the Emirates. And I think if they slowly pick and be smart about when to play at the grounds, the men's grounds, they're more savvy than me about marketing and strategies and stuff like that. But as long as they continue to make them a part of it, then I don't have any issues.
Do you analyse the men's and women's games differently? No.
I try to be ultra consistent in everything I do, from research to say how it is. I call games like catchphrase. I say what I see. That's fair. Will I upset some of my fellow friends that I play with or previously played with? Probably, but it's my job at the end of the day. Their job's to play football, and my job's to analyse it where they went right or wrong. When praise is due, I will 100% give it. And it's exactly the same for the men's game as well. I have to do my job, and people understand that. And players have to do their job, managers have to do their job, and I have to do mine.
You mentioned you're a Birmingham fan. It's great to see that Louise Quinn, the Irish captain, is also going to be the Birmingham captain for this season. What's your prediction then for the WSL this season?
I actually think it's going to be the most competitive to date. I've seen, look, we've had super competitive seasons for sure, and we've seen how tight it's been at the top, with City and Chelsea recently. But there's been some fantastic signings. I mean, I'm really impressed with Everton's acquisitions as well this season. They had a world record fee. I think it was in the region of £150,000 for a Swedish player who's 18, who I think he's going to be sensational. Hannah Bennison, she's incredible. But the top's going to be tight. Chelsea have brought in some players, still strong. Champions League runners-up last year. Have won the WSL twice. Can they win it third time? City have added a lot of good players, and I think they started slow last year because the manager was new. That's not going to be the case this year. So it's going to be very tight. Arsenal, new manager, new style that they're going to play, very aggressive, front-footed and pressing. So the top of the table is going to be really fierce, and equally the bottom is going to be difficult because, Leicester have come up. They've got aspirations, not just to stay up. They want to push on. Birmingham, as you mentioned there, they've been in a bit of a transition. The old Birmingham manager's gone to Aston Villa. So there's a lot of stories, and I think the fans are just going to absolutely love it.
Karen, it's been great to talk to you. You've never been to an All-Ireland final, so you've yet to suffer the real pain of being a Mayo supporter of the countless defeats, but we'll have to get you over one of these years.
I would love it, honestly. It'd be. I'll come over when they win. I'll come for that one time and we'll win, and then I might drop out.
We'll book you in for next week then. It's definitely happening. This is the year. This has all been in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. Karen Carney, thank you very much. So OTB Sports is back with another series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in Premier League and Irish football history. We'll have behind-the-scenes access. We'll be chatting to some of the legendary names from the biggest clubs and meet the crucial people behind the scenes who make a Premier League club what it is. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. So to talk about the new Premier League season and Chelsea in particular, I'm joined by two of their former players, two Chelsea legends. Karen Carney and Roberto Di Matteo are with us. How are we keeping?
Good afternoon. All good, thank you. Very well.
Good. Roberto, Chelsea come into this season as the European champions and with huge expectations. So many people feel that they are the favourites for this Premier League title with the depth of the squad. Do you look at this Chelsea squad? Do you see any weakness?
Yeah, rightly so. They come with huge expectation into the new season because they look very strong. I watched the first few games in this season, and they don't seem to have any weakness. They look very strong and solid at the back. Have plenty of offensive potential up front, and then with the signing of Lukaku as well, there's another. Probably one of the world's best strikers currently in the squad as well, and a really strong bench as well. Watching the game last weekend against Liverpool, and probably the Liverpool is strong as well. But if you look then at the depth of the squad, as you just mentioned, you probably feel that Chelsea has a bit more firepower on there. They probably have 18 or maybe even 19 top players, while Liverpool probably comes a little bit short. So Chelsea will be up there. They will be fighting for the title this year, I think, and probably everybody else will be looking at this team and thinking, well, going to be tough to beat them.
Yeah. You mentioned the signing of Lukaku. He's arrived in for a huge transfer fee, and he is one of, unquestionably, the most destructive strikers in European football. He was at Chelsea when you were there as manager, Roberto, as a young kid. This potential, was it always there?
Yes, I mean, he had a lot of potential when he arrived. He was very young when he came to us, and he probably wasn't quite ready to be in the team then. But he had an immense motivation already. You know, he was so determined to become the world's best strikers. I remember because we worked. I mean, I worked a lot with him after the team training sessions with him, 1v1 and so on. And you know, I remember that he was very focused, and he had an objective in his head, what he wanted to do in his career and his life. And, you know, it took him to go on loan for a few years, but he always knew that he was gonna become a really good player, and it turned out to be so. And he fully deserves it. He's a great boy as well, you know, a really nice guy. But he's improved so much over the years, and I think it's really tough to play against him as well as a defender.
Yeah, it was interesting listening to Thomas Tuchel talk when Lukaku signed about his immediate influence within the dressing room and how he has a real leadership quality now, that he recognises his own importance as the striker in that team, the weight of the transfer fee, and went into that dressing room and you could tell straight away, made it clear to the players what he expected and wanted to achieve. But it sounds what you're saying, even when you go back almost a decade at this stage, that drive and determination was always within him.
Absolutely, yes. He always had that, even as a young player, as a young boy, he had that. And it also, you know, for him, it's sort of going back somewhere where he knows the environment, he knows still a lot of people, and he's probably feeling very comfortable in that environment. He knows where he's going back, what he's gone back to, and he's probably sliding in very smoothly as well, because he knows everything about the club. He knows a lot of the people. He knows the training ground. He knows London. So it won't take him, or it didn't take him at all any time to actually just be part of the group.
Karen, it was interesting to see that Jorginho was voted as UEFA's midfielder of the season last year, because he's a player who has somewhat split opinion since he arrived in England. I often think maybe because he sort of took N'Golo Kante's position on the pitch, and there's so much love for N'Golo Kante for everything that he has done. But what Jorginho did during the run to the Champions League and then helping Italy to Euro 2020, it does feel as though in what Thomas Tuchel's trying to do, Jorginho is a real key cog now.
It's massive, and the fact that they fought off Manchester City to sign him in the first place, Pep Guardiola thought the same things about him. So you reference N'Golo Kante, but they're very, very different deep line midfielders. N'Golo is one that wants to break up play, and he's just instrumental in that. And I think with Jorginho, he's probably more the in-possession type of player that wants to build up and create things and start things from the back. But Jorginho's not, he'd probably look at him and go, mobility-wise, can he get across the pitch? But he's so clever. He always gets himself in good positions. He's always offering, you know, a teammate a passing lane or something like that. So, and like you said, he's won the Euros with his international side, and he's won the Champions League. So I know Roberto's very happy about that. But he's a modern footballer and an intelligent footballer, and I think he has improved over the last couple of years as well. And I think that's as well because of the players around him that suit him for how he plays.
He did, Roberto, come in for an enormous fee at the time, so had already done it in Serie A. It did feel like it took him a couple of seasons to fully find his feet in English football. I'd imagine you're not surprised in any way with the way Jorginho's flourished over the last year or so.
No, because I remember when a lot of support or people were divided or had divided opinions about him. But he's a sort of player that is a delight for a manager because he makes the team tick. You know, he plays one-touch football. He has a very good vision. He always knows where his next pass is before he receives the ball. So for a manager, it's the sort of players that you want to have in their role, you know, in that number 6 role. He's probably not the physically the strongest, but because he reads the game so well, he anticipates where the ball goes, and so he recovers a lot of ball. And probably him and Kante together. Oh wow, what a midfield, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not bad. Where did you watch the Euro 2020 final then?
I was actually in Italy for the final, so it was good fun. Very, very tight game. And Italy probably the second half they probably did enough to earn the victory. When it goes down to penalties, it's always a bit of a lottery at the end of the day. But I thought that Italy over the tournament as well, I think they were probably the best team, in terms of playing. They played the best football. Were very convincing. Didn't concede many goals, and were always good for a goal as well.
I can't believe, as a manager who maybe his greatest day as a manager came as a result of penalties, you're saying they were a lottery. You need to say it takes a managerial genius to pick the right guys at the right time for the spot kicks.
Well, I think I'm humble and objective enough to say that it's a bit of a lottery when it comes down to penalties. Even back then, it's one of those things. You just you do your prayers and hope that you score one more than the opposition.
Yeah. We mentioned some of the options there, Karen, that Thomas Tuchel has this season, and has that depth of 17, 18 international class players, some world-class talent in there as well. Do you expect a stage of this season where we'll see a first choice Chelsea 11 that will get a run of 3-4 games, or is it just a case actually that there'll be a constant rotation that players are well used to at this stage, and that actually freshness is the key as much as stability?
I think you'll have a 8 or 9 bunch of players that will consistently play, and then there'll be probably your attacking players might chop and change in and out of maybe the full-back areas just to keep the freshness, just because of the games that they all play. There's so many, they're all internationals as well, they'll all go away. So you're right, it's about keeping freshness, hunger, competitiveness in the training ground, which Roberto will know more about as from a manager's perspective. But Romelu Lukaku's going to play, Mason Mount's going to play. The back line, you don't really want to chop and change too much, because I always say it, goals win your games, but clean sheets win your championships. So, Mendy's going to always be in goal. So the spine of the team will pretty much, Jorginho and Kovacic will be in there, but it might just be Havertz, Werner, horses for courses in terms of attacking nature. You don't want to mix it up too much.
God, Mason Mount has really developed into a proper world-class talent over the past 6 months, the step up in his game, Karen. When you think back to Chelsea, was there a buzz around him at that stage when you were around Chelsea as to what he was going to go on and become?
Yeah, he was playing in the academy, actually, and he was playing in Birmingham, and a couple of my mates went and watched him play for the academy, and he scored a hat-trick against Birmingham, and I was like, oh, great, we've lost again. And they said, oh, it's this kid, Mount. He's brilliant, played in the number 10 pocket. This kid's the future. And then, there was always a big kind of talk about him in the training ground. And the same for Billy Gilmour, actually. They were the 2 names that were always really, really mentioned highly at Cobham. So it's no surprise. And then watched him develop. And he's just gone from strength to strength, and physically as well. And what's, I think, really impressed me is his mental strength, because Roberto mentioned a lot there about Jorginho and how there were mixed feelings about him, but it's the same for Mason Mount. There was a lot of people that criticised him, said he was teacher's pet and he was a favourite, but time and time again he bounced back and showed why he's an outstanding player, and why Chelsea pick him every week, why England pick him all the time, and why he's a brilliant attacking minded midfielder, clever and creative, and he'll be one for many, many years at both club and country.
So make your prediction for the season then, Karen. Where are Chelsea going to finish?
Oh, it's tough. I actually think they'll come second behind City. Right.
Roberto?
Well, a question to Karen. Who do you think is going to win it?
City first, Chelsea second. I think it'll be very, very close. I just think City will just have that. I don't know. I can't even put my finger to it. I just think City will win it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chelsea will win, but it's probably those 2 teams, isn't it? They're gonna fight it out, City and Chelsea. It will come down to probably, form over the season, maybe injuries to important players, things like that. But Chelsea certainly has the hunger to get the title back. It's going to be tough.
All right, a slight split in the jury there. Karen, Roberto, thanks a lot for joining us to look ahead to Chelsea's season. We've got full-length feature interviews with both Karen and Roberto elsewhere on our social channels, so make sure to check them out. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. All right, OTB Sports is back with another series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in Premier League and Irish football history. With behind-the-scenes access, we'll be chatting to some of the legendary names from the biggest clubs and meet the crucial people behind the scenes who make a Premier League club just what it is. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, our official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club, and I am delighted to be joined by a true Chelsea legend. As a player, he scored in helping Chelsea win 2 FA Cup finals among 6 trophies he won in his time as a player at Stamford Bridge, and as manager he led them to an FA Cup and an unforgettable Champions League triumph back in 2012. Roberto Di Matteo is with us. How are you keeping, Roberto?
Good afternoon. Very good, thank you. And you?
I'm very well. It's a very good time to be an Italian, isn't it? Euro 2020, the Eurovision, the Olympics. Have you stopped celebrating?
It's a very good time to be an Italian. It's been a good summer.
It has been a very, very good summer for the Italians. We're going to talk a lot about your time at Chelsea, but pre-Chelsea, starting off as a footballer and making your debut with Lazio. God, that was an interesting time in Italian football, off the back of Arrigo Sacchi, that great AC Milan side. So many of the world's best players were there at the time. It must have been so exciting as a young player coming in and being a part of that.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be signed by Lazio from Switzerland. I was playing for a Swiss team at the time, and then went to Lazio, and sort of a dream came through for me. And I remember I started from the bench the first game. I came on for Gaza after, I think, 68, 70 minutes. And then started the second game, and that was it. And then I started all the games from then on. It was a good time. It was a very exciting time in the Serie A. Also, especially for Lazio, because a year before, a new owner took over, bought the club, and he was a very wealthy Italian businessman, and he invested heavily into the club. So the club then went, improved year by year and signed some excellent or very good players, which then culminated in winning the league in 2000.
You mentioned you come on for Gaza in your first game, and that's around 1993, so he's already had the first real serious injury. In terms of talent, how much did you know about Gaza before you linked up with Lazio and got to play with him?
Yeah, I knew plenty of him, because obviously I had been watching the FA Cup finals for many years, and also then I started obviously to look up the squad for Lazio and so on, and so I knew him. I knew the kind of player he was, and obviously I was watching the Serie A as well, so I knew what a great player was. He had a good time in Rome. Unfortunately, he had a couple of bad injuries, which really didn't allow him to fulfill his potential in Italy. But it was a great pleasure to be with him in the team.
It was a good team to be in a midfielder in as well, where you have like the creative brilliance of a Gaza, and Aaron Winter is there, Kazaragi, Boksic, Signori. There was a lot of attacking talent there as well. If you were creating the chances, they were going to take them.
Well, that meant a lot of running for me, Yes, we were quite an attacking team, especially in the second year that I was there with the manager we had. basically wanted everybody to attack, and there were many people left behind defending. But yes, I mean, Signori, I think he won 3 or 4 years in a row. He won the Golden Boot in Italy. We scored a lot of goals, and there was a lot of offensive talent on the team.
Yeah. How would you describe yourself as a midfielder at that stage, when you talk about, say, the attacking talent and you having to do a lot of the running? What was your role within the team?
Well, I was probably a little bit like they call in England a box-to-box midfield player. I was defending. I was trying to support the attacking midfielders and players. So I did a lot of up and down the pitch. Scored a few goals, not many, but I had probably a lot of assists during my time.
Yeah. The move to Chelsea then, Ruud Gullit is the manager. Did you grow up worshipping Ruud Gullit and, say, that Dutch team of '88?
Well, I knew Ruud personally because over the years I was good friends with Aaron Winton, so we used to sometimes meet up with the other Dutch players in Italy and so on. So I knew Ruud from before, but also we played against each other in the Serie A for many times. So he knew me as a player very well as well. So I guess he was looking for that sort of player when he became player manager at Chelsea, and he knew me as a person, he knew me as a player, and I guess he felt that I would be a good fit for his team.
You mentioned AC Milan. It's very hard to compare teams across different countries and different eras and times. But that Milan team you would have been going up against around 2004 that won the European Cup in such spectacular fashion. When you look at that team compared to, say, the Arsenal side that was emerging under Wenger or the Manchester United side you were competing against, was that AC Milan a step above even that?
Well, there was certainly the force in the Serie A in the early 90s, AC Milan. You had the previous era with Sacchi, and then Capello came in and just continued the form of that team. They were the team to beat. And I remember one of the first games, I think it was the 4th or 5th game, that was at Lazio 93. We played the San Siro, and I had to fill in at centre-back because our centre-back, one of our centre-backs was suspended. So I had a bit of a nightmares the night before the game because I just couldn't believe it. I was going to have to play at centre-back against those players. And during the game, I remember that they were coming from all sides, left, right, middle, and we were just trying to hold on. And eventually we actually drew the game, but it was one of those games you didn't know where to look, where they were coming from.
Yeah, that's a bit of a baptism of fire at centre half.
Oh, definitely.
So when Gullit makes the call, because Serie A at the time is still, it seems, the big league. It's still the #1 league in Europe. And Chelsea aren't at that stage quite the force of a Manchester United or Arsenal. Was it a straightforward decision to leave Lazio and to go to Chelsea?
Well, I had been 3 years with Lazio, and I was kind of thinking to maybe experience something different. Not that I was desperate to leave, but in my mind I was thinking, maybe it was time after 3 years to maybe do something different. And I think Gullit it was very important that he was the player manager at Chelsea. I think he persuaded me to make the big move to England. I didn't know much about London at all. I knew about the Premier League, but I didn't know that there was so much investment going into the Premier League, which started in, I think, 92 it was. But he sold me the project very nicely. It was very clever selling me the project, and also Ken Bates at the time, he was the president. They made me feel so important and so good about it. So at the end, it was not a difficult decision. I felt that it was the right decision. That's why I did move to England. And looking back, it was the right call at the time.
Yeah. Gullit took over from Glenn Hoddle when Glenn Hoddle then went to take the England job. This is the summer of Euro 96. And a criticism that was often put out about Hoddle was that maybe he struggled to deal with players of lesser quality than him, and that would often be the best player in training still. Like Ruud Gullit is one of the greatest European players of all time. Him as a manager, and I know being in there as a player manager, was he comfortable dealing with players, not all of whom were as good as he was?
Yeah, absolutely. He just put himself at the level where he was the same with everybody. You know, he didn't make anybody feel less important. He has this personality. He's quite a humble guy, if you know him. He's not like a big star. He's not big-headed at all. You know, he might seem or he might come across like that, but he's totally the opposite. So I don't think anybody had a problem with that. I don't think he made anybody feel that they weren't good enough. But also we had a very good team environment. You know, all the group that we had was a very good group. They made, you know, the 3 foreigners that arrived in '96 made us very welcome, helped us integrate into the club, into the new culture as well. And we tried our best to make it as quick as possible and smooth as possible. But because Ruud knew that, you know, he was a foreigner himself, he kind of knew what kind of problems we might face at the beginning. He was really helpful, and he put a couple of people around us that could help us settle in as quickly as possible. And also he had a vision of how he wanted to play football, and that's why he signed certain types of players.
That settling in period is, you know, something we never really talk about a huge amount when players from other countries arrive into England, that difficulty that some have with settling. You know, you had grown up in Switzerland, you'd then gone to Italy, move on to England. Was it straightforward? Was it a comfortable setting for you in London, a big city? You'd been in Rome, but getting to London and suddenly being part of a club like Chelsea, was it straightforward? Did you feel at home straight away?
Personally, it was, yes. I didn't have any issues at all. I mean, I had lived abroad. I mean, I lived in Switzerland, so coming from Italy was kind of going abroad again. And I didn't have any issues with the culture. I didn't have any issues settling in. It was kind of also coming from Italy, you know, it was kind of taking my private life back as well, because in Italy it's a bit more difficult maybe to have a private life when you are a football player. So I really enjoyed being able to just go out and even to go to the supermarket. I really enjoyed going to the supermarket and nobody talking to me about football. You know, so there were certain aspects that was really good, and also I could see that the club was going in the right direction. You know, they were trying, they were building a new stadium, and it was an exciting time to be part of Chelsea.
That's interesting you talk about the move from Italy to England and being able to go to the supermarket, because we would think that the interest levels, particularly around then, around '96, where football was front and centre, it was tabloid heaven in a lot of ways, that even still it wasn't comparable to what was there in Italy.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in London, so I'm not sure if you can compare with the other cities in England. I mean, I don't know if in Liverpool or Manchester or Leeds or so on, if it's the same. But in London, there are so many clubs, and people would probably recognize you, but they wouldn't come up to you, or they would just say hi and leave you alone. So that was totally different to Italy.
It's a quarter of a century now since you moved to Chelsea. And when we talk about that time of what happened to Chelsea under Gullit and the players he brought in, and yourself, and Vialli and Zola and Leboeuf and Arsene Wenger arriving in at a similar time at Arsenal and the French influx there, it was seen that it was this culture shift for English football, that maybe the Spice Boys of Liverpool, that kind of generation, was been a little bit left behind. At the time, did you realise that? Was that part of the remit from Ruud Gullit of, actually, we're coming into a old-schoolish English dressing room with the likes of Dennis Wise and Scott Minto and Mark Hughes, and we're going to do things differently. We're going to do things the way we did them in Italy?
I think they had already started with Glenn Hoddle a little bit, because obviously Glenn played abroad as well. So he had the comparison of both worlds. So that started already. And then I think Ruud took it a little bit further by basically introducing a few new methods, you know, in terms of training sessions, diet as well, and so on. I mean, and we probably brought some of that in as well from Italy, you know, in terms of how to behave, maybe off the football pitch, you know, to have a professional life. I think we certainly brought a little bit to that, but I have to repeat, you know, the boys in Chelsea, that group that we had, they were so good to us. You know, they tried very hard to make us speak English and teach us English, some more than others, you know, because obviously the Scottish boys you can understand at all when they're trying to teach us some English words. Tennis-wise, forget about it. So we had a few that were talking better English, and they helped us along the way, and we took lessons, and so that was our way to show respect as well, because you need to integrate as quickly as possible into this new culture, and probably the language is one of the most vital points of integrating, because that allows you to communicate.
Would you have seen that then when you went on into management, when you talk about the language and the importance, and you would have a dressing room where you may have 10, 12 different nationalities, and I think, do you speak 5 languages at this stage? That maybe you were better positioned than a lot of managers to deal with that, but actually integrating young men coming to England at 17, 18, 19 who don't have the language, that it is so important for them to get to grips with it.
Yes, that's right, but most people now, or you know, probably in the last 20 years, most people speak English, or at least a little bit of English. So, but what some miss is that they don't want to really accept that they are in a different country and integrate into the social and cultural aspect of the country. And that's probably one of the downfalls of so many players that then just don't make it here, even though in other countries they have had a really good they've had good success and good careers, but then they come over here and fail, because it's so important that you feel good outside the football pitch as well, because at the end of the day you're not going to spend your whole day on the training ground, so you got a lot of time at home with your if you have a family, and they need to be okay as well, otherwise you can't focus on the football.
What a time that was to be a midfielder in English football, when you're going up against Manchester United and Keane and Scholes, or Arsenal with Vieira and Petit. English football, was that a lot more frantic than Serie A? That would have been the perceived wisdom, that there was a bit more of culture in Italian football. It was slower, it was more tactical, and English football was hell for leather in the middle of midfield. Was that your experience of it?
Yeah, and it was very exciting. You know, it was much quicker. The ref also they let the game flow, and there weren't that many fouls to interrupt the game, and it was really tough as well. And we had some really good encounters with the likes of Roy Keane and Paul Scholes and Patrick Vieira and so on and so on. But it was always good fun, you know. We kicked each other a few times, actually many times. But you know, after the game, it was a handshake, and it was all forgotten. But I like the pace of the English football, and still do, because it's very exciting. There's always something happening, and sometimes you kind of have to slow down a little bit to be able to control the game. But looking at the Premier League from abroad, you know, everybody enjoys the pace of the Premier League, you know, because there's so much action going on. It's never boring.
No, certainly not. Maybe you were well suited as well with that role you've been playing in Lazio, and it seemed like it was quite a high tempo game that you were expected to play. Anyways, did you alter the way you played the game when you came to England in any way?
No, it was Gullit that sort of pushed me a little bit further up the field, because he thought that I might be better suited for the team, playing better a bit up the field, and so that allowed me to have a bit more freedom going forward rather than going backwards, and also playing with Dennis in midfield. Dennis Wise in midfield. He always encouraged me as well to go forward, and that really suited me, and I managed then to score many goals and important goals for the team, and be a vital part of that team.
Which was the more fearsome or worrying side, perhaps? Roy Keane coming at you at full speed, or Patrick Vieira coming at you at full speed?
Not sure. Not sure. No, we had some good fights. I mean, you know, there were always the big games against Arsenal at the time, and against United. There were always the big games, the big fights, and tough games. It's probably the same, I would say. You know, Patrick was a bit obviously taller than us and a bit more physical, but you know, with Roy we had some exchanges. But it's all good at the end of the game, you know.
Yeah. You mentioned there, like, your goal scoring record and the big goals you scored. For so long you had that record that everyone knew of being the quickest goal scored in an FA Cup final. Watching back that goal and the way you struck that ball, in that it was drilled high, dipping, what's your memories of the actual strike and how you hit it, and was that exactly what you were looking to do?
Of course.
Yes.
No, I had it really sweet with my laces, so the ball came out really nicely and quite strong, and it dipped behind the goalkeeper, who was probably a couple of yards outside his goal. What I was thinking is that, you know, Mark Hughes was in front of me and he was making a run. I was just thinking, don't give it to Mark Hughes, please. Don't just shoot. Just have a go. Just have a go. Obviously, then, you know, I hit it quite nicely, quite sweet, and it was very nice. It was a good way to start a final.
Yeah. Is that thought process about Mark Hughes, is that literally because it's, 43 seconds into the game and you know you'll have plenty of opportunities to pass to Mark Hughes, that it's so early, actually, why not take the risk?
No, he was making a run that I thought that he wasn't on. I thought, you know, just shoot to the goal, and I was quite far out, but it was worth a chance, and you never know. And exactly, if you don't try, you know, you don't score. So yeah, that was my thinking more than anything else.
I think, is it the exact same technique that Ronaldo's been trying to hit his free kicks with for about the last 15 years? To get that little dip right at the end?
I can't claim that. I can't claim that one.
No, I'm sure he sat down on YouTube for hours watching it.
I cannot, but certainly, I mean, the balls now, they're a bit lighter, so they're a bit easier to make them dip and so on.
Yeah. Like, that was first major trophy for Chelsea in 26 years at that stage, which is hard to imagine now considering what they've done over the last 25 years. That record you have of big games, big finals, 2 FA Cup finals, scoring goals, something you're very proud of, I'd imagine. Something you thought about at the time of, actually, I have a process around big games that I make sure I'm in the right mentality to perform my very best in them, or just something that happened?
I was just never scared of big games, never nervous. I just had the right tension for those games, and I always seemed to perform really well in the big games because I was quite confident in my ability. So I always knew that I was going to be able to perform and give my support to the team, and it worked out nicely. You know, even though I didn't score in a few, but I scored in many, and that was really good for the team. And it was always you know, the team was the objective, you know, as to perform as a team, and if everybody did their job, we would have won the game. And so we were lucky enough to go on, you know, after 96 or 97, sorry, after the final, to then go on to win some more trophies, you know, year after year. And that was sort of our objective, to win a trophy every year. And in my time, we only managed 1 year not to win anything. That was in 99, when we were fighting for the Premier League title.
So did you not get nervous before big matches?
No, I just had, I had the right tension, but not nervous, no, not at all.
And when you were in a dressing room then, would you have looked around and seen players who actually had those nerves, and listen, maybe they were able to use it in a positive way? Was there anything you could do with your teammates to influence them to ensure that they actually went onto the pitch with that similar sort of attitude?
No, because everybody has their own kind of set of mind before a game, and they do whatever they need that makes them feel comfortable to go into the games. And I can't tell you, but there are some players that do some weird stuff before
Go on,
the game.
tell us.
No, I cannot tell you. What goes on in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. Seriously.
For some reason, I'm thinking Dennis Wise must have done something a bit crazy.
Well, no, you'd be surprised.
Oh, yeah?
And other players that did some strange stuff.
Your retirement from football then and the horrendous injury you picked up, for some reason in my head, I always assumed you would sort of come back and saw your playing days the way you would have wanted. Like that injury.
Me too.
Was it, you were, 29 at the time?
I just turned 30, yeah.
Just turned 30.
Months after my birthday, yeah.
It seems you knew pretty quickly that this wasn't just a broken leg, a serious injury that you could recover from in the normal scheme of things, a 6 months absence and you're back, that actually this was going to be something that actually was going to threaten your career.
No, I at the time I didn't know that it was going to terminate my career or end my career. I knew it was a serious injury, but I tried very hard to get back and to come back, and I did everything I could with the doctors and the physios. But I think it was probably at some point after 15, 16 months, just a little time before I then officially retired, where, thoughts started creeping into my head that I might actually not be able to play anymore. But I did try. I knew it wasn't a just straightforward fracture. But it's one of those things in life, it was probably meant to be that I had to finish my football career earlier than expected or planned. But, life goes on, and then you try to reinvent yourself and look at what options you have in life and start maybe a new chapter in your life.
Were you able to think about it with that sort of calm thought process at the time, that this is the end of one chapter and the start of another?
It's easy to talk about it now, but I went through a really difficult time. It was very, very tough. Physically, it was tough. I had a lot of operations. Mentally, it was tough. Suffered from depression. But I eventually recovered from everything. And then time helps to heal. And you kind of try very hard to forget about it, what happened in the past. And I'm a person that likes to focus on the future. So that really helped me. And I started over, and I tried to do something different. And then eventually I found my way and in something that I enjoyed and liked. And then what happened?
Unfortunately, it's the sort of thing that does happen. A small minority of players, that they find their career ended at that stage. When you found yourself having those mental health issues, were there people you could talk to around the club? Would you still go into the club on a regular basis, or did you find actually you were isolating yourself?
Well, I was doing a lot of obviously rehab and physio, so you're quite isolated, because the team obviously does their training sessions and then goes home, and you're there almost the whole day doing your rehab work with the physio, with the doctor, on your own, with the fitness coach, and so on. So you're isolated from the team. So it's quite difficult. And then if it drags on and so on, and we're talking about 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago. So, people didn't talk that much about mental health issues at the time. It wasn't that recognized or accepted at the time. And I didn't go and see anybody because just I didn't know that I could go and see somebody, or that somebody could actually help me. With the help of my family, my wife, and then I had a baby and my parents and just the immediate family and some friends, I then slowly started to get better, and also physically better and mentally better, and I came out of it. But when I was depressed, I didn't realize that I was in such a deep hole mentally, But looking back afterwards, analyzing what happened to me, like after a year or 15 months, I remember there were a lot of dark days that I experienced, and it was tough. But I came out of it, and I'm really blessed that I had really good people around me. You know, my family, kids, or my children, my parents, and so on. So my wife, she was very important.
Yeah, because it's tough on those closest to you as well. Like you talk about your wife and having a young child, and like footballers, they have to be incredibly selfish. Everybody around you, their life almost has to revolve around yours as well, because everything is about you being in peak condition on a Saturday afternoon or a Tuesday, Wednesday night. And suddenly from probably your entire routine that when you first met of training, matches, to you being sitting around the house all day and being 30, 31 with no idea of what you're going to do for the next 50, 60 years of your life, is a difficult thing for a family to come to terms with.
It's a big change. It's a huge change in your life, because you go from being a professional football player to suddenly, you know, Monday morning you don't have to get up to go training. So you need to fill those emptiness. I decided to go back to school. I went back to university because I studied back in Switzerland. So I thought it would do me good to increase or upgrade myself academically. So I did that, and that took a lot of time. You know, I went every day to uni and studied a lot. So that took up a lot of the hours in of the day. And that happened as well to get through months and a year. I think it was a year and a half or so. And the family was so like, the family for me was so important. You know, we then got a second child, so I had 2 babies, and that really was a big focus for me.
As you say, it is 20 years ago now, and I think everybody's awareness and understanding of mental health issues has grown massively in the intervening time. In football, do you think attitudes have changed? Do you think a player who's going through that now would have the right support systems in place within a club? Do you think even as a manager and someone who's been in management quite recently, that managers have a very different attitude to players who are suffering from long-term injuries, who aren't in a good place?
I don't think so, yeah. I think today it's much more respected. If you have mental health issues, you can find a lot of support. Most clubs still these days have sports psychologists working for them. So you'll find somebody you can talk to, or somebody can show you in which direction to go if you have any issues. Managers are certainly more equipped with dealing with that as well, and suggesting maybe which person to talk to. So I think we've come a long way in that sense, and it's good that we have improved that sort of environment in football, because, you know, yes, we are top athletes, footballers are top athletes, but first and foremost, we're all men, you know, we're all human beings, and we can have issues even if you have a career.
When you go back to school then and go back to college and educate yourself, is it always with the end goal of getting back into football and educating yourself in a way will be beneficial as your life progresses and management starts to come on the horizon?
Oh, after I retired, I wasn't quite sure what to do. So that's why I went back to uni, and I started doing my coaching badges and so on. And I spent a bit of time with my family as well, because when you're playing, you're always busy traveling. You know, you're never at home weekends, and summer holidays are when the season is off and so on. So it was good to be able to enjoy different aspects of life. You know, be able to maybe have a Christmas with your family in Italy or abroad or Easter or so on. So that was good, but I didn't really know what to do at the time. Yeah. And then suddenly I found what I enjoyed, and I did a bit of media work and a bit of other stuff, a bit of coaching, and then at some point I started to manage, started to coach at MK Dons. It was kind of out of the blue, because I was working at the European Championship in Switzerland for the Swiss television, and I received a call, and I thought, you know what, might be the right time to just try it out, give it a go, see, you know, if I like it, see if I can be successful. that was the start of my managerial career.
Yeah, and you've spell at MK Dons, you go on and there's success at West Brom, and you're probably in that managerial cycle where there's success and very quickly there's a couple of results that don't go well and you find yourself looking for a job, and Andrew Villas-Boas comes along and is the hottest property in European football. He's the new Jose Mourinho. He gets the Chelsea job and you go in as assistant manager and things don't go the way he would have liked. And towards the end of the season, I didn't realise it was quite so late that it was March, where he ends up losing his job and you come in as manager. That dressing room, which you obviously knew at that stage, having been his assistant, but that is an interesting dressing room where you have Cech, Terry, Ashley Cole, a young David Luiz, Lampard, Sen at the latter stage of his career, Drogba, Torres. When results aren't going well and you take over in a dressing room like that, how do you go about the process of turning things around and getting all those type of personalities singing off the same hymn sheet?
Well, obviously there were a few issues in the club, obviously, because the results weren't good and so on. So, we just tried to focus everybody on one objective, and that was the team objective. Everybody had their personal issues and people. The dressing was probably a little bit divided. But we appealed to the fact that it was sort of the last ship for many of the players that was sailing in the Champions League, and that it was sort of the last opportunity for many of that group to be able to win something important in their careers. There were only, I think, 2 players that had actually won it before, and that was Pocinho and Paulo Ferreira. And everybody else had never won it. So we appealed to that, to leave just all the personal issues that they had between each other just outside the dressing room and just focus until the end of the season to come together as a group, as a team, and all have the same goal as in achieving, qualifying for next year's Champions League, trying to win the Champions League and the FA Cup. So those were the 3 objectives. And it sort of worked, it sort of worked. We included everybody in it, everybody, obviously, when a new manager comes in, normally it's like that it's a clean sheet, everybody has a new chance, and we got everybody involved, and that was it. That's how it worked out.
The impact was pretty instant. Watching back some of the highlights in the matches of that Champions League run over the past few days, so lost 3-1 to Napoli in the first leg of the last 16, and then there's this momentous 4-1 victory. Like, watching back that game, David Luiz, there's barely been a more divisive player over the last decade in English football as to whether he's this modern, brilliantly talented defender or someone who can be a bit of a head case at times and a bit of a liability. Like, that night, he was as good as you could imagine. Seemed like a real leader in that Chelsea group.
Yeah, he was, but not only him, there were so many leaders on the team. I remember, Michael Essien. I remember putting Michael Essien into the team, and Ivanovic was immense, and it was a good team effort. It was a good team effort, and it was sort of the last hurrah. If we didn't go for a year, then it would have been a really difficult season, but without that objective of the Champions League. And we managed to turn it around, and it was I remember the atmosphere in the stadium, it was electric. It was so electric, it was so exciting, and everybody was jumping up and down during the game, because it was quite a good game as well, because Napoli was a good team as well. And, we went ahead, and then they scored, and we needed to score, one more, and which we did in extra time.
The semi-final against Barcelona is one of the most memorable Champions League games probably ever seen. In some ways, it feels like there's echoes of Manchester United in '99 and their success, and that they'd Bayern Munich in the final and they sort of got the job done, where actually the performance was the semi-final in Turin against Juventus, and the performance for Chelsea was that semi-final against Barcelona, the second leg. Find yourself 2-0 down on the night. Gary Cahill's gone off injured. John Terry's been sent off. Literally everything that could go against you does go against you. And somehow you grind that result out. Fernando Torres scores that late winner that sends Gary Neville a little bit crazy in the commentary box.
He could have scored before. It would have been a bit easier for the club.
Yeah, for everybody involved. You talk about bringing the dressing room together, Roberto, when you got the job, and maybe there'd been a divide in the dressing room. Like, you're going up against possibly the greatest club team of all time in that Barcelona side. How big a job as a manager is it to tactically prepare for going up against that Pep Guardiola side?
Well, more than tactical, because tactical, yes, we prepared very well. I think I watched probably 10 games of Barcelona before we played them, and funny enough, it was always the same result. I watched them playing against a team that played with 4 defenders, against a team that played with 5 defenders. 5 different systems: 4-3-3, 5-3-2. High press, middle press, low press, to try and find something that we could work on. But the result was always the same. Barca always won the games. So it was more like playing to our strengths. So what are we good at? What can we do really, really well? And how can we then consequently limit Barcelona? You can't limit them completely, but limit their qualities. And but it was more a mental game, mentally, because you have to prepare your players when you play against Barcelona, or a team against Pep Guardiola's team. You play against a Pep Guardiola team, you know that you're not going to see the ball much. So that 3/4 of the time, after 90 minutes, the opposition is going to have the ball. So it's a mental preparation to this game that you're not going to have much to ball. There's a lot of sacrifice you have to do, running for yourself, for the team, for the victory. And so that was more important. And we managed to win the first leg. We managed to win, even though Barca had a few chances. But we did our homework, and we did exactly what we thought that we were going to be able to do. We did it in the first leg, and that gave us a little caution. And then in the second leg, it's just, you go down 1-0, and all right, happens in the new camp, and then you get a player sent off, his central defender. And you think, we could be in trouble here now. And then they score the second, and you think, oh my God, how are we going to do this now? And then suddenly, out of nothing, Frank Lampard plays an absolute great pass, reverse pass, and Ramirez, I think he was playing right back. By then he was playing right back. Just scores.
What a finish.
Over the goalkeeper. And we go in at halftime, and we are 2-1 down, but we are basically in the final. So it changed completely the atmosphere and the dynamics at halftime, because if you go into halftime 2 down, you have to chase the game. But like that, they have to chase the game. So it completely changed the dynamic. What was happening at halftime. So we just made sure that we knew what we had to do for the second half, and then you just hold on for your dear life. That's all you can do. You hold on for your dear life, because obviously playing against them 11v10. It's difficult. We saw it, Liverpool against Chelsea. If you defend well, you can. But that Barcelona team, it was full of qualities, and they could just open you up at any time. And obviously Peter Cech, he was in top form. Managed to save the penalty. And then, at the end, he scored the goal, and, then it's over. But I was quite calm in the second half. I have to say, me and Steve Holland was next to me. We were in the dugout, and I don't know, for some weird reason, we just, in the second half, I felt really calm. I could see the team was set up nicely. I could see they were working together. As a group, as a team, and I don't know. I knew they were going to have a chance. Everybody knew that they were going to have a chance. 2, 3, who knows? And then Czech saved the penalty, and they couldn't really penetrate us that much. They had some attempt from outside, some crosses, and some half stuff. But I was really calm. It was really strange. I was looking at the clock and it was ticking down, and I was like, oh, okay, only 25 minutes. No, only 15 minutes left, and then suddenly, we're in the final.
I was reading an interview with Juan Mata talking about the final and your preparation, and spoke about how you'd done all the tactical work, obviously, for going up against Bayern Munich. But what he remembered most of all was before the game and the way you were able to connect with the players emotionally and passionately, and had organised a video of, I think, family and friends of the players, wishing them well, and, really soaking up what it meant of the achievement of getting to a Champions League final. That side of it, as a manager, clearly something you spent a lot of time thinking about of, yes, we know we can do and watch Bayern Munich 10 times and figure out the way they're going to play. But getting that emotional connection, it seems, was something that was very important to you.
Yeah, I think we had a really strong connection. As I said, at some point, the players just realized that, if everybody was thinking individually, it wouldn't work. That I'm talking about the beginning when I took over, and they needed to talk as a group. Think about what they could achieve as a group. And the video was more, something to release a bit of pressure, just to make them understand that life is bigger than a final, than a game, a football game. It was mothers, there was wives, children of players that we recorded videos of, and a few tears were shed as well, and in the meeting, and I think they realized that it's an important game, but life is much bigger than that. And what I remember is that I could feel how the pressure was released. When they came into the meeting, they didn't know it was the day before. The night before, they didn't know what it was about the meeting. They thought it was about tactics, about the position, so on. And then we played this video. It was thanks to the help to all the staff, because it took a big effort from everybody from the staff to make those videos and to keep it secret as well, or as secret as possible. And it was just when they left the room, you could really feel how relieved they were. There was some, I don't know why, but we could feel that they were relieved. They were just sort of, okay, so, the final is important, but it's not the most important aspect in our lives. And that's what I remember a little bit about that meeting.
And what a final it was. Didier Drogba gets the equaliser in injury time. Petr Cech saves the penalty from Arjen Robben in extra time, and then Drogba, with his last kick for the club, wins the Champions League. After a success like that, do you ring Andrew Villas-Boas? Do you talk to him afterwards? Because you'd obviously started this campaign together and he'd been there for quite a bit of it. Is that, I don't know what the process or expectation is when a manager changes hands like that. Did you ever speak to him about that season?
We were always, we were still in contact when he left, because I had a really good relationship with Andrew Villas-Boas, and I always gave him credit. If you look back, I was getting credit for what he had built to that point, and that part of the success was thanks to what he had done in the 9 months that he was there together. So I always gave him credit, and we still talk sometimes. Yeah, we bumped into each other in Qatar, in Doha, where we were both on pre-season training with different teams as well. So we had a good chat there. But certainly he deserves credit, because obviously up to that point he managed the team, and he left a really good team. There were some issues, yes, but he left a good team behind, and I was just able to then finish something that maybe was the goal at the beginning of the season.
Went through some of the unforgettable moments of the final and the entire route to it. Still, probably the one thing that comes up most often is John Terry, full kit, lifting the trophy. As manager, did you know that was going to happen?
No, there was so much going on. I missed the team picture, because when I came down the stands after we received the cup, some reporters stopped me at the bottom of the stands or the stairs. So by the time I finished to speak to them, the team had already taken the picture on the pitch. So I missed the picture. So I didn't see everything that was going on. I was told about this afterwards, you know, 'cause, I mean, everybody was overjoyed with the victory and the win, and there was so much going on. So I only realized or saw many of the celebrations after, or a day or two after.
Yeah. Since then, obviously, you know, you spent a few more months at Chelsea, you'd spent at Schalke, you had some time at Aston Villa. Where are you now in terms of football and management? Is there an itch to get back in? You're still a very young man, still a huge amount to offer to the game. Or have you been a little bit burnt by the whole managerial experience?
No, after Aston Villa, I sort of wanted to take a break because, I was a bit fed up with the whole industry. Not the industry, but, you know, sort of, you know, being let go after such a short time, you know. I just didn't find it right. And so I took a bit of time off, and then I quite enjoyed myself, I have to say. Quite enjoyed myself, and I'm a person that has some hobbies outside football or some interests outside football as well, and so I focused a little bit more on them, and I still know that at some point I will be a manager again. I will be back in football again. As you said, I'm still young, and I do get that itch sometimes. It's not quite strong enough yet. But I know it's gonna come. You know, I also wanted to spend a few years with my kids that were growing into an age where they were going to leave house, you know, going to university or college and so on. So that was important for me as well, because you cannot recover that. You know, once they're gone, they're gone. And now I'm at a point where, you know, all the children are sort of settled in their academic lives or work, and so I wonder what the next 12 months will be, because it's going to be just with no children in the house, and I wonder if I'm going to get that fire back to maybe start something again. Am
I right in saying there's an Irish heritage in the house as well?
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, my wife, she's half Irish.
Ah, very good.
It's got that fire in the belly, the Irish fire.
And did any of the kids decide to become footballers that we could maybe bring on over? No, the great traditions of Irish football?
I have one son, and none of them play football. So nobody's going after daddy's legacy.
They're better off out of it. Roberto, it's been a real pleasure to talk to a true Chelsea legend, talking to us in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates and promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. Roberto Di Matteo, thank you very much. So OTB Sports is back with another series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in Premier League and Irish football history. With behind-the-scenes access, we'll be chatting to some of the legendary names from the biggest clubs and meet the crucial people behind the scenes who make a Premier League club what it is. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. Chelsea legend Roberto Di Matteo is with us. He is picking his all-time Chelsea five-a-side from the players that he played alongside. So, Roberto, who's in goal in your Chelsea five-a-side?
I have picked Carlo Cudicini.
Carlo Cudicini.
My fellow Italian mate, but most important, he was outstanding. I mean, he came into the club not as a big signing. He came from a small club in Italy, and he was kind of a backup. He came as a backup at the time, but he worked his way up into the first choice keeper, and he was outstanding. I mean, he made some saves where he left with your mouth open what he saved. And so he would definitely be my number one choice in goal.
Ed de Hoy, I thought would have been straight in there.
Well, if you saw Carlo Cudicini and Ed de Goy in the shower, you would pick Carlo Cudicini probably.
Bloody hell. Good man, Carlo. How do you follow that one up, eh?
No,
is this the criteria for the entire five-a-side?
I'm more talking about the beer belly.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Defenders.
Love you, Ed de Goy. Love you, Ed de Goy. I love you. I love you.
Don't tag Ed in this. Defenders, you got a lot of good options here. So who are you going to go with maybe as defenders in the five-a-side team?
Well, there's not a better pairing than Frank Leboeuf and Marcel Desailly. I mean, 1998 World Cup final pairing. How could you not pick those two? And also, they don't have any language issues, communication problems, because they both speak French. So, no, I mean, Frank Leboeuf was a very smooth player, very elegant player as well. You could ping a pass over 50 yards, but also in five-a-side, he has a very, very nice technique. And Marcel, just to scare the opposition off, you just get the rock in there and make sure that the opposition is scared before the game starts.
Yeah, you mentioned Leboeuf and his technique, and he had those sort of trademark long balls that he could play. Like Desailly was an absolute Rolls Royce of a centre half. Just as comfortable if he wanted to step into the middle of midfield.
No, absolutely. I think again that was Ruud who instrumented the move with Marcel, knowing him and from his AC Milan connections and so on. And we were very lucky to get him as well.
Yeah.
I've got some good stories with Marcel.
Oh, yeah? Can you give us any of them?
I give you one. If you have time.
Go on.
So we played Country City away the year before. We thought this a year, right? So we get smashed. We lost the game. So next year, the year after, we go up there and we've got Marcel in the team. So me being really cocky before the game, I go to DNW. I go, hey, DN, look at who we've got this year, The Rock. And guess what the result was again? We lost again. So it didn't quite work out that way.
He let you down. He let you down in your hour of need. Dion Dublin got one up at him.
He did.
John Giles, who you might remember, he used to play with Leeds United back in the days, with us all the time. And he talks about that midfielder moving to a defensive role and how actually, the great midfielders could always play at centre-back because it's a lot easier for them in that they can see the game in front of them from defence. Is that what you would have found with Desailly, that actually, he was able to play the game on his own terms at the back?
Yeah, I think he was quite happy that he didn't have to do that much running anymore in midfield. So he was quite comfortable at centre-back. And, he was still very strong, powerful. He could read the game, having played at AC Milan. He knew exactly where to stand, what to do. So he could anticipate a lot of the moves. So he was quite comfortable, but he was so strong. I mean, he was an ox. You should have seen him in the dressing room. His legs were just... I mean, I had big legs, but his were double my size, and I mean the amount of food that he could eat. Oh my God, it was just disgusting. I mean, seriously, and he had the six pack all the time. You saw him eating, you would think, how can this guy be so lean? He was just unbelievable.
So when we talk about the change of culture, actually, Marcel came over, brought a different type of culture of just eating whatever he wanted, but whatever was in his metabolism, he could probably cope with it in a way the English lads couldn't.
He did eat a lot, I mean, quantity-wise, but he was always looking what he was eating. So he would eat a lot of white fish or rice or maybe pasta. So he was always eating healthy stuff.
Let's move on to your midfielder then, who's going to have a busy old job, I think, in this team. So many great options who were at Chelsea around the same time as you were. I think Didier Deschamps had a spell. Obviously, Gus Poyet was such a brilliant midfielder for Chelsea. But you've gone for somebody else.
Yeah, I picked Dennis Wise because me and Dennis, we played so many games in midfield together, and he was always the sort of player that you wanted to have by your side, when tough got going, So He always made you feel safe, Dennis. And he was a great player as well. You know, he could run for fun. Seriously, I mean, you should have seen him in pre-season. What the sort of running that he could do in pre-season. He was always up front. I can't explain how he did it, but if we were doing some running, he was running in his own group. You know, the fitness coach used to put players in groups, and you know, the midfield group, the fullbacks and the wingers and strikers and so on. And he was in his own group because nobody could keep up with him. He was running so quick, you know, like a mile or 2 miles, so quick, nobody could keep up with him.
Right.
And his recovery was so amazing as well. He could recover so quickly. They will be straight away fit for the next game.
And what about with the ball? Because you talk about his attributes there, and you know the energy he had.
He was a really tidy player.
Yeah.
You know, he had a good right foot, a good left foot, and I'm not sure he got actually the credit for his technique, because he was quite technically quite sound player. You know, if you look back, you know, he was very good. I
can accept you picking Dennis Wise above Deschamps and Poyet, but did you not play alongside Ruud Gullit when you were at Chelsea? Surely you've got to have Ruud Gullit in there. In your five-a-side team, you want Ruud Gullit.
Well, he was the player manager, wasn't he? And then after a while, he started to just be a manager. But he gave me a choice of only 5 players, so I had to pick 5 players. So I couldn't pick more than that. So, you know, so Dennis was always on my side in many games, and we had many battles together. So he would certainly be in my five-a-side. I could put Ruud as the manager of the five-a-side if you want.
Yeah. You're probably more likely to get an angry phone call from Dennis Wise than Ruud Gullit if you don't put Dennis in the team. So it's probably the wise option.
No. Dennis is cool. No, he's cool.
Your final choice then for your five-a-side, who are you going with?
Hashtag magic box, Gianfranco Zola.
An absolute genius.
Do I need to say anything else?
Not really, but talk to us about...
Some games we just go like, okay, guys, today, just give the ball to Gianfranco. Just give it to him, and he does the job.
Was he like that every day in training as well?
Yeah, he was pretty special. Not every day in training, of course, because, you know, we try to kick him in training and stop him to do silly things against us, okay? But in the games, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure playing alongside him. It was easy to play alongside him as well. And also because we played in the national team together, so I knew him from before, so I knew, you know, what he wanted. And so there was a really good connection between me and him. And I knew when he was coming short, they wanted the ball in behind the defenders or the opposite. But mainly it was just you know, tactic was just give it to Gianfranco.
There was such excitement, I remember, around that time when he joined as well, with this new era of the Premier League. And having already played with him and knowing him as well from the national side, like, did you ever think maybe English football won't be for him?
No, not at all. I was over the moon when we signed him. I was over the moon. I knew he was going to be a hit, a big success. I mean, he's above average, isn't he? So. When you're such a good player or talented player, you can play anywhere in the world and you're always going to be exceptionally good. And his attitude to football, it was very good. He was a true professional. So I knew him, and I knew that he was going to be successful for the Premier League, but also for us, for Chelsea. Whenever you do a list of all-time Premier League greats, he's always on that sort of short list. Is he held in similar reverence in Italy? Yes, pretty much so, yes. He probably, in Parma he had a very, very good time. In Naples he was still young. Maybe in England he had probably his best time. No, Parma he had a really successful time as well. Yeah, he's held very highly in Italy too, yes. It's not a bad old five-a-side team. Carlo Cudicini mightn't actually have much to do in goal behind Marcel Desailly, Frank Leboeuf, Dennis Wise and Gianfranco Zola. You weren't able to pick yourself in this team. That was the one rule we had, but you wouldn't mind being part of that team, that's for sure. Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I was part of that team for many years. Not five-a-side team, but I was part of it. But I think that's a pretty good, strong five-a-side team. I think we could play against anybody.
I think he could. Roberto, thanks a lot for that. In association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships, you can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates and promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. All right, OTB Sports is back with another series of in-depth chats with some of the biggest names in Premier League and Irish football history. With behind-the-scenes access, we'll be chatting to some of the legendary names from the biggest clubs, and we'll meet the crucial people behind the scenes who make a Premier League club what it is. It's all in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates on promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club. I'm delighted to be joined by a real trailblazer in Irish football. Lisa Fallon is with us. How are you keeping, Lisa?
I'm good, Nathan. How are you?
Very well. Lisa, currently head coach with Galway United, working down there with John Caulfield, and formerly game strategy and tactical analysis coach with the Chelsea women's team, working under Emma Hayes. What does a game strategy and tactical analysis coach do?
Literally, what it says on the tin, you analyse the opposition and you tactically analyse what way they play and how we need to play and create the game strategies for how we're going to play and win games.
So there's a lot in that. You might talk us about your coaching journey, I guess, and how you got to this position, because I say you're a trailblazer. It's very unusual for there to be a female coach in a head coach position at a League of Ireland club, or obviously at a Premier League or Championship club over in England. When did you first start getting the interest in coaching?
It probably goes back, Nathan, to when I was 12. I remember watching a football programme called The Managerial on Channel 4 back in 1989. And it was the first time I think I ever saw a female in football, and Sherry Lungy played Gabriella Benson, and she was the manager, appointed the manager of a second division team in England at that time. So that was the old first division and the old second division. So it would have been the equivalent of the championship. So that probably was, up until then, I just loved football. I was always on the sidelines with my granddad and my uncles. Football was very much alive in our house. And so it probably came from there, if I'm honest. That's probably where the seeds were sown. But all the way through my teenage years into my 20s, 30s, I was always interested in it. Started coaching when I was actually 14. I helped out with an under-12 girls team locally in Lucan. And literally, it was just always there. So, like, I went to college over in England to study sports science and English in 95. Prior to that, I had done a football course, an association football and career management course in Coláiste Ida in Finglas. And I was the first girl to do that course as well. So it was always there. I always wanted to work in football, but I was never really sure, I suppose, as a girl, that there was a pathway. And inadvertently, radio broadcasting or sports reporting probably became the most obvious route for me to go in order to work in football. And that's the route I went. And then, as it turned out, I ended up getting to work in football as an analyst as a result of interviewing people as part of my job as a sports reporter. So it was almost a full circle type of thing. But then I suppose my first analysis role was probably with, I worked as a coach under John Caulfield back in 2012. It might have been earlier, actually, with the Irish men's university squad. Then worked with Cork City for 6.5 years. Worked with Northern Ireland for Northern Ireland's men's national team for 6 years. And then just, I suppose, over the course of that period of time, I was doing my coaching badges. So I did my UEFA B, then my A, and then I progressed on to do my pro license. And during that time, then I would have been, whilst I was working with Cork City in Northern Ireland, I was also coaching and managing in the Leinster Senior League. So it all just progressed gradually. I wouldn't say I had a particular path or a map routed out. It just kind of, one thing generally tended to happen after the next. And that ultimately led to me getting the opportunity to go and work over at Chelsea in 2019. which was an incredible opportunity. And really it's all kicked on from there.
That lack of a pathway that you talk about, you mentioned working in radio reporting, and back in a previous life we used to work together on a regular basis at GAA matches at Croke Park, and as you say, you'd get talking to coaches after games and you'd be able to express your interest and your knowledge, and it sort of kicked on from there. That chance also isn't available to everyone. So did you feel there was a blockage for you as a woman in actually taking even the first steps onto a more professional coaching ladder?
Yeah, you know what? It's a really good question, because when I look back, it probably wasn't, because I ended up in roles, and once I was in a role, that role generally progressed into another one. So it was like, once I was like with Northern Ireland, I initially started in there making the team's motivational videos and filming training, and that evolved to cutting clips of training, doing live in-game analysis during the matches and doing some opposition analysis. But it was once I was in that, when you're in the environment, your capacity to grow and develop or bring something new to it evolved. And it was the same at Cork City. So I would have started off as the opposition analyst, then I became the team analyst, then the head of football analysis, and then into a first team coaching role. But all the while I was still coaching and managing in the Leinster Senior League. So in tandem, I still had other coaching and management roles. So I suppose I've been really fortunate that once I got into a role, it evolved. And my career has generally followed that pathway. I suppose after the 6 years with Cork City in Northern Ireland, I felt I probably needed a change of environment and culture, and to work at a different level. And that's when the opportunity came up to go to Chelsea. And just prior to that, I also had the opportunity to work with the Dublin senior Gaelic footballers, which again gave me an insight into a really elite performing culture. High performers where winning is paramount and driving that successful model, but learning to do it and learning how it was done in another code, and then being able to bring some of the stuff I had learned in the environments I had been, could they transfer to that environment? And then how could some of the things from that environment transfer into my sport, which is predominantly soccer? So from that perspective, it was very interesting. And then obviously when you go to Chelsea, you then have the opportunity to work at the highest level of the game, in one of the biggest football clubs in the world. So that progression, like I say, it just generally tended to happen. And then as a result of that, I became a head coach in the Women's Championship in England, albeit being cut short due to the COVID crisis. And then the next step then is the head coach role in Galway United. So, and albeit that's different because it's a men's first team as opposed to a women's team in England. But generally the standard in England in women's football is very high. I think people probably underestimate the standard that it's at. And, it's probably at a par, if not, it's certainly the top level of the women's game in England, probably be a bit higher than the men's, the highest level of the men's here.
In terms of that high performance element that you would have really witnessed at Jim Gavin in Dublin, and bringing what you learnt there then over to Chelsea, was that a straightforward transition? Are there a lot of commonalities between, say, what an Emma Hayes is trying to do at Chelsea and what Jim Gavin was doing with Dublin?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, all managers who are in that environment, what Emma had at Chelsea was a mind-blowing, incredible culture that she built over, a number of years, 8 years, I think it was. I have to say, like, what Emma has done for women's football, not just at Chelsea Football Club, but in the game in general, she has driven the standards of the game over there in an incredible way. Because certainly when I went in, I was surprised a little at the start about how advanced the game was, and the resources more so, that, what was available, and how, what's available for the men's team is available for the women's team, and rightly so. And whilst there is disparity in wages, and people talk about equality, but I think it's more about equity. It's about having the opportunity to train full-time like a male player, like a professional male player. It's about having the right resources, the right backroom team, all the things that a man needs to progress and play at the highest level of the game and have a career, that was all in place at the women's team. And that's, I think, is something that, you know, what Emma's done there, she didn't only drive the standard at Chelsea, she's, as a result of what she's delivered and done at Chelsea, that's rippled out and it's filtered across the whole women's football industry in England. And I think it's a real testament to her. So from that perspective, it was a brilliant environment to work in. And then also because of that close relationship between the men's and the women's teams, and sometimes the sharing of facilities, there was crossover, there was opportunities to, you know, see things and learn from people and speak to people and gain that experience, I suppose, that any other environment wouldn't give you. And also the opportunity to work in it and see, you know, there is a mystique about that level of the game. And maybe I was a little bit, maybe at the start, intimidated about the whole prospect of going in there and thinking, you know, will I have what it takes to deliver at that level? But I think it was really interesting, and just being able to go in and being able to bring something new to the environment, a different lens, a different opinion, because that's what you're brought in for. And then also, you know, to work with all the different coaches and all the different members, because sometimes an environment can get stale, a successful environment. So it's really important to freshen it up and consistently bring new things, because the thing about high performance is what you did last season won't be good enough next season. You consistently have to evolve, because times never get slower, performances never get less. It's always better, better, better. And where are those margins for incremental improvement that make a high performer the difference? Like we've been watching at the Olympics and the Paralympics, and the difference between first and second place in two events yesterday was 0.01 seconds. Like they're the margins of error at the highest level of sport. And that for me was, you know, the opportunity to go into that type of environment and see it and feel it and live in it and be in it and work in it every day was incredible. And I really loved it.
And did you get a sense when you were at Chelsea and working with Emma Hayes that the way she has driven the change, whether that was by accident or design, whether it was, I'm coming in here and I want this team to be the best it will be, and it sort of naturally evolved as more interest was in the women's game and as Chelsea progressed? Or did you get the sense she went in and thought, actually, if the men are having this over here, well, we may not get quite that, I want as close to that as possible, and went knocking on the right doors and actually had to be quite forthright in getting what she wanted for that team?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, actually, because even speaking to some of the longer term staff that had been there certainly longer, I was a newbie in, but, you know, even speaking to them, they were saying the difference in 3, 4, 5 years had been incredible. That transition in terms of resources, in terms of the access to facilities, and in terms of the size of the staff and the expertise in the staff around the team to help generate that on pitch performance. So that was certainly, and that again comes down to what Emma did and how she drove that and how she justified it, and how she, you know, was pretty relentless about it, because she would have had to be, because she was changing a whole environment, not just a facility for a women's team. She was changing a whole environment because we were all based in Cobham, and I think it's a real testament to her. But with that was also that, you know, that demand that she has of winning and that aspiration. You know, she's made no secret about it. She wants to win the Champions League. They came very close this year, the closest they have done. But they lost in the final to Barcelona. But again, I know that that's something that drives her every day. And she is, you know, any top level manager or any top level head coach is driven by that. You know, and at a club like Chelsea, you know, it is about delivering trophies. It is about delivering titles. That is the demand of that club, and rightly so. So yeah, it is a bit of both. It was a two-stranded thing that she's achieved, both the access to the facilities and the resources for the team, but also at the same time delivering success on the pitch, which you have to have one to justify the other.
You're working as head coach at Galway United, and John Caulfield is there as manager. We still, within the top ranks of English football, have never had a female manager. When you look at Emma Hayes, what's better for the women's game, or maybe it's totally irrelevant that she is one individual and an outlier, Is it staying at Chelsea and driving those standards within Chelsea and within the WSL and within English football as a whole and raising all the boats? Or would it actually be Emma Hayes getting a job at a men's club and sort of breaking that glass ceiling once and for all?
Yeah, look, and I think, you know, she'd be perfectly primed for it if an opportunity came. But I think what's really important is to understand that the level that the women's team is at Chelsea is far higher than a lot of clubs in the men's game in terms of resources, facilities, teams, and the whole environment. And I don't think Emma would give that up lightly. But what I also love about Emma is how driven she is and how passionate she is for the women's game, and that Emma doesn't see the women's game as being any less than the men's game, or that the men's game is in any way superior to the women's game. And that is brilliant. And that is so, so important, because it's very difficult to, you know, opportunities for women are so in football at the highest level are there's not many of them, you know, and for Emma to be so passionate about the women's game and so consistently a driver of it, that she just doesn't see where she is being any less, or that moving into the men's game would be progression. And I love that attitude. I think it's so important, because the women's game is the fastest growing game in the world. There's massive resources going into it now. UEFA prize money for the Champions League is growing. The games are becoming so competitive now that there's proper investment in the development of the female athlete, because for decades, the women's game has always been benchmarked off the performance levels of men. So physiotherapy, GPS, loading, all that type of stuff, the tactical analysis of the game, the breakdown and the statistical data upon which you measure the Premier League and the Championship in men's players. That was the only benchmark. But what has happened in the last 2 to 3 years, particularly, and a couple of years before that, but certainly more in depth now, is that resourcing and that investigation of what is it that makes success in the women's game, how and benchmarking elite female players against elite female players, and that medical science, physiotherapy, the ways of treating the female body are different to treating the male body. Because we're structurally different. So, and huge amount of work gone into the whole area around the menstrual cycle and how that impacts on performance. That was something I hadn't seen until I went to Chelsea, was how valuable and important it is to factor that in. And when you do factor it in properly, how much of a difference it actually makes in terms of players' capacity to perform at their best week in, week out, and also in injury prevention. So from those capacity, from all those areas, it's been, you know, so important. And the game is developing at that level, and the women's game is only going to continue to grow. There are now proper careers, full-time professional careers and progressions available for females. And I think, you know, that is a really positive thing. It's only going to go one way, but we need people who believe in it to keep driving that. And maybe not necessarily look at the men's game as being the best option, but actually looking at what are the opportunities in the women's game and how can we drive it, and what kind of a legacy can we leave behind for the next generation of females that come through, be they players, coaches, board members, administrators, or just working in the backroom teams of football, never mind if it's men's or women's. But Emma is a really special character, and I think, you know, she'd be a huge asset to the men's or the women's game. But personally, I think she'll make more of a difference in the women's game. But somebody will have to do it at some point, and I wouldn't put it past her. But I hope she's not finished in the women's game first.
That's really interesting, the way you talk there about the different needs of, say, female sports people, because we were talking to Karen Carney as part of this series, and I was asking about the role of men's teams for the women's games, whether it's in terms of playing in their stadiums or facilities. And she was saying the importance of the women's team being just part of the club, that Chelsea is a men's team and Chelsea is a women's team. And I guess the next stage of that is actually the women's teams and female players have very different needs than the men's teams do. And it's not just a case of, well, the resource for the men's team is this, let's give that to the women's team. They need more specific resources tailored to actually what they need for themselves in terms of facilities, in terms of backup staff, Do you see that coming down the track, that actually the investment is there for that?
It already exists at the highest levels of the women's game in England, to be fair. WSL and championship level in England would certainly have a lot of that in place already. I think in Ireland, we have massive scope to develop. And I think, we're probably a good bit behind where we need to be. And I think it's something that I'd like to see the progressing in the women's game here, is that we really get a really cohesive plan to develop the women's game, because we have some very, very good players in this country, and that, we start to actually get the investment, but that clubs take ownership of the structure, and that there's a collective will to change the landscape of women's football in this country, how it is now, that we can change that over the next 5 to 10 years and really leave a legacy piece. That it's not just that we don't talk about women's football and men's football, we just talk about football, and it just depends then ultimately on who's actually playing.
When was the last time you worked in the women's game within Ireland?
I worked in the women's game back in 2011, so with Shamrock Rovers in the inaugural year of the Women's National League.
And would you be wary, Lisa, weirdly, of being pigeonholed if you went back working in the women's game, as a woman working in the women's game, that actually it might be more difficult for you in a way to get jobs then in the men's game?
I don't look at it like that. At the moment, the men's game in Ireland is really the only place where there is full-time work available for a coach. And even at that, there's not really, you have to have another job in order to work in the League of Ireland as a coach. So I don't see it that way, because again, and it comes back to that mindset about how people look at the game. So people might see working in the women's game as a step down. I don't see that. I really don't see that. I see right now I'm working in the men's game, and it's, for me, it's just about understanding the environment that you're in, how you work with the players and the environment and the culture of the club that you're with, and how you create the best environment for those players to succeed, and ultimately to create winners, to create a team that wins football matches, because that's what we're here for. That's what my job is. Whether I'm in men's football or women's football, it's to create that, a team that can win football matches. So right now I'm in the men's game because they're the only opportunities in Ireland for a female coach. The only opportunities to have a career is in the men's game. Now, I would love to see that change, because I think there is so much potential in the women's game in this country. And it's a little bit heartbreaking that the opportunities are not there. But I hope that over time, that, with the appointments of the likes of Ruth Fahy at Galway Women's Football Club as a CEO, it's a game-changing appointment. I really would like to think, and there's some really exceptional coaches working in the Women's National League, and there's a lot of work being done. But I really do think there's so much potential. For me, I don't know how people perceive it on the outside, where I'm best placed, whether that's in the men's game or the women's game. For me, it's about the team that I'm with, and how can I create a winning team in the environment that we're in. And that for me it doesn't matter whether it's men's or women's football, because you're still trying to create a team that wins. And I would always bring all of my expertise and all of my experiences over the last 12 to 13 years to whichever role I was in. But right now, the only opportunities for me as a female coach to be a professional female coach is in the men's game in this country.
And as you say, even then, to get a full-time job as a coach is a very difficult thing in League of Ireland football. And you do have some other interests. You've been a regular on our TV screens over the last year or so as a pundit, covering the European Championship, covering Champions League games. I mentioned Karen Carney was on. We saw what happened to Karen Carney in the UK last year around Leeds United and some of the pretty sickening abuse that she received. How have you found it? How have you found being on television covering these big games and the sort of reaction you've got?
Yeah, it's a bit daunting. It's a bit different answering the questions to asking them, that's for sure. But no, it's been a brilliant experience. It's something I've really enjoyed. You're getting to watch football and talk about it. And it's been lovely. I think there's been a really positive, I've certainly got a lot of really positive feedback. People have welcomed and seeing a female. And I think, probably when I started off doing it a couple of years ago, when I did the Women's World Cup in 2019, there was no real comment as to whether you were male or female. But as soon as I started doing men's Champions League games or men's Republic of Ireland games, straight away people are going, well, why would you have a woman on talking about men's football? Even though my whole career in management and coaching has been pretty much in men's football. So straight away you're judged just because you're a female, even though you work in the men's game and at the highest levels of the men's game. People still had that lens through which they would see you. But what I've loved the most over the last 2 years is that it's normalising. You know, you have the likes of Karen Duggan, Anya O'Gorman, Steph Roach, all these other females that have been on the TV screens. And it is starting to normalise, and kids at home don't differentiate so much between whether it's a woman or a man, given their analysis and their thoughts on the game. I think once you can deliver stuff that people can relate to and that, you know, there's a bit of quality in your content, I think that's the most important piece. I don't think it shouldn't matter whether you're a male or female delivering that content. And my hope is that, you know, over time that the conversation shifts away from whether you're male or female, and it's just whether or not you bring something valuable to the conversation that you're involved in. And I think it is changing. I think, you know, some of us have certainly had to have thick skins over the last 2 years, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. To change that landscape and to make it easier for the people who come next, and that we normalise it, and that women can be seen as bringing value to sport, whether that's as a player, a coach, a manager, a pundit, a panellist, an analyst, a board member, an administrator, whatever it is, an executive, no matter what level of the game it is, that females have a lot to contribute. And it's not that we're trying to overtake men or anything like that. It's about what can we bring and add to the game and add to the different conversations, different lenses, different viewpoints, different experiences, and that we make the whole football experience a better experience for more and more people. Because in this country, we need to make football appeal to everybody and improve it. And that's the challenge for us at this time, because, you know, whether people like it or not, the game is for everybody. It's not just for guys. And I really do believe that women have a lot to contribute, both to the men's game and to the women's.
Well, you're certainly contributing a lot at the moment, Lisa, I think it's fair to say. Very best of luck with the rest of this season at Galway United. Hopefully you get promotion and you're back up in the Premier Division next season. No pressure.
Thanks a million.
Great to talk to you as always. Lisa Fallon joining us in association with Cadbury FC and their club partnerships. You can also check out cadburyfc.com for updates and promotions and giveaways. Cadbury, official snack partner of Chelsea Football Club.